Welcome to Navigating a Broken Vessel. I'm happy to have you here. In this episode, we are going to talk about death and trials. There's been a lot of people wanting to know a little bit more about me, my story, kind of a little bit about my life. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail there. I'm going to talk about the kind of crazy amount of death that has happened in my family just in the last few years. And not only death, but some of these other problems that generally you hear stories about when they plague people and the issues that families have. But it seems to be that just in the last 6 or 7 years, and I don't say that as a joke, 6 or 7 years, that just seems to be plaguing my family. And I want to talk about how I've dealt with that, kind of what's going on, things like that. All right, a little bit about myself. So I am the third of 6 children. My parents have had 6 children. Of those 6 children, there are 5 boys, including myself. So I have 2 older brothers. I have a younger brother, just 2 years younger than me, a younger sister who is 5 years younger than me, and then a younger brother who is 7 years younger than me. And my parents and our family, the children and everything, we grew up in Southern California and then moved to Southwest Utah, about 1991 or so, when I was just about to go into high school in California. But in Utah, you actually have one more year of middle school before going into high school. So I would have gone into high school into my ninth grade year as a freshman if I had stayed in Orange County, but went into ninth grade at the top level of middle school when I moved to Utah. I'll tell you a little bit more about bullying and other things that I experienced in my life through my middle school years. That'll be in a future episode for sure. That's still on the list of things to do. But what I want to concentrate on is the last few years. I want to tell you a little bit about my dad. My dad, he actually started as a salesperson for essentially Hallmark stores. His family was involved in Hallmark stores. He got into manufacturing gifts, started with balloons, then went into mugs and other things, and created these gifts that would be sold in Hallmark stores. And that's how he lived his life for the first, 10 or so years when I was alive, the first 10 years of my life. And then he decided he wanted to be a lawyer. So he went to law school at night. And so I remember during those times not seeing him very much. And then he finished law school, passed the bar, and became a lawyer. And I can tell you that during those times, that was hard. That was hard on our family. He was a lawyer. And I should even say, even night school, going to night school is really tough. It's hard to work a 40-hour week and then go to night school for maybe 3-4 hours a night. And then when you are home, having to study. I remember many times him just having a book, having earplugs in his ears, and reading a book. But I can tell you, though, my life with my dad was phenomenal. He was a phenomenal dad. I say was, so it kind of gives you a little bit of a hint of what's to come. But he was a phenomenal dad, always wanted to make sure that I was doing well. Always called me David A. Hey, David A., that kind of a thing. And, normal parenting stuff. Some of the things I loved about him is when we got in trouble, he would say he was going to fix our wagon. Hey, I'll fix your wagon, right? Or, hey, you guys get to work, get your rear in gear. He would say stuff like that. So, really funny things. He grew up in Idaho. And so being a farmer type person living in the country was kind of his thing. So it's kind of funny that we spent so much time in Orange County, California, but at the time it wasn't really the big, huge metropolis that it is today. So love my dad, absolutely love my dad. I want to tell you about my oldest brother, Brian, as well. Brian and I, we got to know each other pretty well. Even though he's 4 years older than me, we got to know each other pretty well when I went to college for my first, I'll say, quarter and a half. Because back then at the university I was going to, it was quarters instead of semesters. And I went to a quarter, went to a half of a quarter, and then dropped out. And during that time, Brian lived with me in the same apartment. He had his own room, I had my own room, and then we had 2 other guys that lived with us in that apartment. And I could tell you, those were fun times. We had roommates that were interesting. One of them was learning to be a dairy farmer and would come home smelling like a dairy farmer. If I could just say that, maybe I should probably say he smelled like cow dung. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And the strangest thing about that is that he would just sit on the couch rather than changing his clothes and showering and then coming and sitting on the couch. So, of course, me and Brian enjoyed working with this roommate and having a little fun with this roommate who kind of always smelled like poo, if I could just put it that way. Another roommate that we had was really quiet at first, and we made lots of good friends, made really good friends with him. But Brian, I learned a lot about him during that time. Very, very fun to be a part of his life. He always knew what he wanted. He wanted to be a personal injury lawyer. From the time he was very young, wanted to be a personal injury lawyer, and that's what he ended up doing. He went to law school, finished law school, passed the bar in both Utah as well as California, and actually not California and Nevada, actually passed the bar in Nevada, and was a personal injury lawyer in Las Vegas, Nevada for quite a few years. And yeah, that's Brian. Now, let me tell you about my baby brother, Ken. You'll notice I'm kind of singling specific people out in my family. My baby brother, Ken, was one of the funniest people I've ever met. Very, very, very funny guy. I could tell you one of my earliest memories is when we first moved to Utah. He and my next little brother, the one who's only 2 years younger than me, who's still alive, so I'm keeping his privacy by not naming his name. But he and my little brother, Ken, and my little brother, who's 2 years younger than me, stuffed Ken into a suitcase, zipped up the zipper, put it on the front porch of someone's house, and rang the doorbell. And so here's this suitcase that contains Ken in it, in this suitcase. And that's the kind of guy that Ken was. Very, very, very funny. And actually, coming up next week, we're actually going to interview his wife at the time of his death, right? So there's no secrets here. Yes, Ken is one of the people in my life who is a member of my family who has passed away. So we're going to talk with his wife next week as well. Definitely stay tuned for that, because as I'm about to reveal, which I'll probably just reveal right now, he was actually 36 years old when he died, and he had a baby. His youngest was just a month and a half old when he died. And other than that, he had a kind of a his, hers, and theirs situation, and actually had quite a few kids when he passed away. So it's really a sad story there. Do definitely listen to or watch, if you're on YouTube, next week's episode, because we're going to be talking to his wife. All right. So I want to talk to you about what happened. So on Memorial Day of 2019, my wife and I and our children, we were up visiting my mother-in-law, and we were at her house up about 45 minutes away from our house here. And I got a call from my mom who said, "Hey, Dad has fallen from a ladder and it's not looking good. You need to get back down here to home." And so, of course, we freaked out. We got in the car and drove the 45 minutes to get back home. Come to find out that my dad was helping to build a patio cover, a shelter or an awning, whatever you want to call it, above a patio. And the funny thing about my dad is he always wanted to do things himself. He was the kind of person, a lot like me, that would learn how to do something on a YouTube video and then would basically be an expert, right? I'm a YouTube expert. I'm going to go for it. And that's how he was. And so he was building this patio cover and was actually building it with my baby brother, Ken, who I was just talking about. The two of them were building the patio cover on Memorial Day, and the two of them were out in that backyard. Now, what's interesting about that is my dad was starting to get a little bit tired. And so because it's Memorial Day, he and my mom and my baby brother, Ken, they went all to the cemetery, the local cemetery, to visit my mom's mom and dad and my dad's mom and dad, who happened to be buried in the same cemetery. At the time, my dad and mom had cemetery plots that had already been purchased, and so the location where they would be buried was already known to them. And while they were at the cemetery, they had a discussion as to where the person who has died lays relative to the cemetery, to the headstones and other things. In other words, are they facing east and west? Are they facing north and south? Is their head facing east or west? Where's the headstone relative? They had a whole discussion about it. And what my dad did is he said, "Hey, here's a headstone. This is how I would be laying down relative to the headstone." And he laid down in the grass at the cemetery to demonstrate how a person who had passed away would be buried at that particular plot, the very plot that he had purchased. And little did he know that less than a week later, literally less than a week later, he will be 6 feet below where he was demonstrating that. And we'll get to that, of course, here in just a second. But I always think about the things that he had done, the decisions that he had made, the decisions we had made because I could have stayed to help with the patio cover. There's all kinds of things we always ask ourselves, what could I have done different? Is there something I could have done to prevent any sort of tragedy? Well, what happened is that he went back to building the patio cover, and during that time, Ken was taking a little break. He was getting some water. My dad was up on a ladder. He was on the second rung of the ladder. It was just a regular old step ladder that probably had 6 steps on it. Not a dangerous ladder, not the kind of ladder that a person would generally fall off of. And he was only on the second rung. He was reaching up above his head and was drilling in a screw into the patio cover. And what happened is that one of the legs of the ladder slipped off the concrete patio and fell into the planter, which was probably 2 or 3 inches lower than the concrete that the ladder had been on. Because of that, my dad lost his balance on the ladder and fell backwards and hit his head, the back of his head, on the concrete. So he was on the second rung of the ladder. I mean, what is that? Maybe 3 feet off the ground, 1.5, 2 feet off the ground. I don't know, 2 feet off the ground, 2.5 feet. I don't know, whatever it was. That second rung, you can imagine, just 2 steps up. He was not far off the ground. The problem was that he hit the concrete with the back of his head, had no way of breaking his fall because, as we all know, as humans, our arms are not very good at making it so we don't hit our heads when we fall backwards. So he hit his head very hard. My brother and my mom, who was also outside, heard the sound, saw what happened, heard the sound, and knew that it was a very big problem. My brother Ken was a nurse. He knew how to do CPR. So my mom called 911 and Ken performed CPR on my dad. So my baby brother, my dad's youngest son, performed CPR to attempt to keep my dad alive. And the neighbor who lived next door, heard the commotion, knew there was problems, came over and said, let's get him to the hospital. So they took him in the ambulance. By the time he got to the hospital, he was there a short time by the time we got there. And he was not going to recover. We knew as a family, as many family members as we could get to be there, we knew that he was not going to recover. And he did end up passing away. I think it was the next day. It wasn't Memorial Day. It was the next day that he passed away. Now, anyone who has experienced something like that knows how challenging that is. It is very, very difficult when a tragedy happens. I completely understand that many times death happens and it's expected. Maybe a person's been sick for a long time or they have a disease that causes that. I myself have experienced that a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I can tell you that when there's a tragedy and you are not expecting that death will come, you think back and you start to do things like blame yourself. You start to look back at what could you have done different. You start to look back at the memories of when was the last time you saw this person. I can tell you that I have done every single one of those things. That I can tell you that the Saturday before, so it was Memorial Day, would have been a Monday. The Saturday before, myself, my dad, and one of my children went up on a 2-hour drive each way to go check out some land that my dad was wanting to build a cabin on. And that was my last time with my dad. When I got out of his pickup after he had dropped me off, I said, "See you later," and did not know that that was the last time that I was going to see him. Now, I am not the kind of person that's going to say, remember that death happens all the time. You need to make sure you cherish these memories and that you always think of this as being the last time you'll see somebody. I mean, I get that. I think we all know that. But I think that fundamentally, I think death affects us all. Even those who say they're not affected by it, it affects us all. And I can tell you my experience as well. My dad has just died, and of course I was very sad about it. But I want to keep going. I want to talk about Ken. So Ken, my baby brother, the one who was in the suitcase, funny guy, very, very funny guy, got married and had a few children, 4 children, and then that didn't work out. So he and his wife divorced, and Ken married another woman who we're actually going to meet next week. Her name is Ashley, and Ashley had some children of her own. She's got 5 children of her own, and so when they got married, the 5 children and the 4 children then became one family, of course, with visitations with the other spouses and things like that, of course. But Ken and Ashley had a child, and we'll talk a lot more about that next week when we get into the episode with her. So I'm not going to spoil it now, but I can tell you that that child was born on Thanksgiving Day, and within, a month, Christmas time. It was literally Christmas Day. Ken had to go up to the hospital after many, many ins and outs of ERs here in the local town in which we live. Ken ended up going 300 miles away to a larger city to get an operation because the doctor up there said he should have been operated on a long time ago. So Ken went up to Salt Lake. We'll tell you the full story next week, but it turns out after ups and downs, after about, 10 days or so, give or take, that Ken unexpectedly, because yes, there were ups and downs, but overall the trajectory was positive. He was going to get better. He was getting better every single day. And then all of a sudden, as we'll talk about next week, my sister-in-law gets the call and Ken died. And so in this case, he had this problem. He had problems with his body that we'll talk about next week. Again, I hate to keep teasing that, but he had problems with his body for years. And in the last 6 months of his life, it was very, very problematic. He would go to the ER, gone to the doctor many, many times, and ended up then, because of this problem, passing away. Now, I don't want to get into this whole idea of malpractice and other things. There was all kinds of reasons why that wasn't an option or things like that. I think the doctors always do the best they can. In this situation, I think the doctors did do the best they can. I think there's some things that, definitely we would have changed. And that is what I'm talking about. We always think about, well, what could I have done different? What could I have changed? What decisions could I have made? For example, I feel like, I gave Ken a little bit of a milkshake. I said, hey, you're fixed up. Let's give you some of this milkshake. And I always think to myself, is it the milkshake that killed him? Is it what I did that killed? I can't help but wonder that. And that's very common, I've learned based on my own experience, is that that's very common that we blame ourselves. I can't believe that how close I was in that situation with Ken, the whole situation with the operation, the other things that happened, and was there when my sister-in-law, my mom was also there. The three of us, we were there within moments of him passing away, within 20 minutes or so of him passing away. That is a very, very hard experience. So now we look at it, we say, okay, 2019, my dad dies. January 5th, 2022, my little brother Ken dies. And so now we're looking at my dad, my baby brother, they've passed away. And now it's like, okay, wait, who's next, right? Who's next? Well, I tell you what, my brother, who is still alive right now, I'm not going to name his name again for privacy, but on his 49th birthday, he was swimming at Laguna Beach, California. And during that swim, he happened to catch a wave. It was just body surfing, didn't have a surfboard or a boogie board or anything like that. But while he was swimming, he happened to just be dumped over in the wave. We're not completely sure what happened because he would be the only one that would know. But he doinked his head on the bottom. Because he had a bruise, he had some issues up here on his forehead. So we figure he must have hit the ocean floor, which caused his neck to jerk backwards. And he was dead. Now, spoiler alert, he didn't die. I'm not going to try and, lead you down that path. But for all intents and purposes, he was dead from that point on. His heart stopped and so forth. He was just out there in the water. He had a couple of his children there, a couple of his stepchildren there as well. And the lifeguards, they went out there, they pulled him in, they did CPR on him, the ambulance came, they shocked him, brought his heart back. He was brought back from the brink. And that happened, I believe, 2 more times. I'm not completely sure, but his heart stopped at least twice on his way to the hospital as well as out there in the ocean. And while in the ER, he was not in good shape. He was not in good shape. He should be dead to this day, and the doctors saved his life. That's all there is to it. The doctors saved his life. However, he was in a coma for a week. We weren't sure whether he was going to make it. After he woke from the coma, we learned, and I mean, we were aware of his injuries. We already knew that there was going to be problems, but we learned when he woke up that he was not moving his arms and legs. He had a broken neck and spinal cord injuries. His spinal cord was not severed, but his spinal cord injuries were such that his arms and legs don't work. He can barely move them today. Now this is January. This is August. Let's see, when is this? This is his 49th birthday. So it would have been in June of 2024 that this took place. So June of 2024, on his 49th birthday, he basically is a quadriplegic. It's been now almost, we're getting on 2 years, getting close to 2 years now, and he can barely move those limbs, not enough to really do anything with. So he's been in a wheelchair. He operates his wheelchair with a joystick that he controls with his chin, and a button that he can push with his cheek to change the modes of his wheelchair, make it do different things, speed up, slow down, go up and down, and that kind of stuff. And that's certainly tough for him. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not tough for him, but it's kind of changed his personality too. He's become a little bit more quick to anger and things like that, which has been extremely difficult for all of us to deal with, but particularly my mom, who is taking care of him at the moment as well. But again, I don't want to get into that because of privacy. Everyone's still alive. I definitely want to respect privacy. I don't feel like I've given too much detail away. All of that's basically publicly known on social media and other things that are there. So I don't feel like sharing any of that information is not something that I shouldn't be doing. But I don't want to be disrespectful of a person's privacy. So now we have my dad, who has passed away tragically. We have my baby brother, who has passed away, as far as I'm concerned, tragically. We have my second older brother, 2 years older than me, who is a quadriplegic. And I'm going to say tragically, right? All these things that are not known beforehand, and they just take place, and that's what happens. And then we have my oldest brother, 4 years older than me, Brian, who just this last year got very sick, and he ended up dying. I mean, that's all there is to it. When I say very sick, I mean, I want to respect his privacy. It's relatively fresh still, and so I'm not going to say anything about that sickness. He did not commit suicide. I'll just put that out there because people always assume when a person doesn't want to share, that's all there is to it. But again, it's for privacy reasons. But I can tell you that on August 27th of 2025, he had just had his 52nd birthday and passed away. And that one we kind of knew was going to happen. We were aware because of his sickness. We knew that he was going to have problems, and that would be a tough one. And because of that, he did end up passing away. There's more. There's more. My sister, my only sister, who's 5 years younger than me, just a year and a half ago, right about the time, a year or so ago, right about the time after my brother has had that quadriplegic episode, I could tell you that my sister diagnosed with cancer. And anyone who has dealt with cancer, of course, knows how problematic that can be. Anyone who hasn't dealt with cancer knows how problematic that can be. And so my sister has cancer. She has received treatment. It does seem that it is going to be fine, that all is going to be well. But as anyone who knows anything about cancer, who's experienced cancer, you kind of get that situation where, yes, they're all as well, and you just always have that fear in the back of your mind that it will come back, and it just seems like when it comes back with a vengeance. And so both my sister, myself, my brother who's left, my other brother who's a quadriplegic, and my mom, of course, all want to make sure that never happens. My point is, I am not at all trying to say that my situation is worse than other people's situation. I'm not trying to say anything about, woe is me. I don't want anyone to be like, wow, I can't believe it, Dave. I'm so sorry, that kind of a thing. I want to tell you my thoughts, my feelings, my testimony, frankly, about these situations. Because a lot of people would look at it and say, how do you survive? How do you get through these things that are happening? These are major trials, right? And we all experience trials, as we've mentioned in previous episodes. I've had serious bouts of depression. I've had serious bouts with anxiety and other problems like that. But I can tell you, dealing with death like this, I mean, myself, my brother, 2 years younger than me, who's still not a quadriplegic, and then my sister, who has recovered from cancer, the three of us will sometimes look at each other and say, who's next? Who's next? And what's it going to be? Is it going to be death? Is it going to be paralysis? Is it going to be a disease? What's it going to be? And I like to look at it and say, wow, I'm kind of a little bit overweight. And maybe I wonder if it's going to be myself, because yes, I am definitely a bit overweight, and that is not a good thing. I totally understand that. With that in mind, how how do I get through these things? This is what this podcast is all about, is saying, hey, I've experienced these things. These are the things that I've tried. They've worked for me. In no way am I trying to give mental health advice. This is informational only, not meant to diagnose anything, not meant to say I'm a mental health care professional. I am not. I'm just a person who has had mental health challenges in the past. All I'm here to do is share with you what I've experienced and how I've gotten through these things. My faith, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The belief of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that families, family organizations, parents, siblings, and so forth are designed to be eternal. Furthermore, we also believe that all people, no matter how naughty they were in this life or how good they were in this life, will be resurrected, meaning all of us will live again. Knowing these two things, and when I say knowing these two things, I I will testify to you, because that's what members of the Church of Jesus Christ will do when they know these things through the Holy Ghost. I will testify to you of these two things. I know that families are forever. I also know that all of us will be resurrected. Now, how I know that, you may want to argue, of course, that's fine, but I can tell you that I know of myself, independently of other people, that that is true. And that is because I have felt the Spirit of our Heavenly Father confirm that to me. My faith, therefore, has been a huge aspect for me of knowing that I get to spend more time with my dad. I get to spend more time with my oldest brother and my baby brother. And I know that my older brother, who's 2 years older than me, who's a quadriplegic, I know that he will not be a quadriplegic when that time comes. He will have full use of his body again. It will be resurrected into a perfect form. With that in mind, it's the same with my sister with cancer. It's the same kind of thing. I know that these things are going to be fine. Now, there are many members of the church. There's also people that would be outside the membership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that would say, well, why do you cry at funerals then? You know, what's so sad about a funeral? I mean, if you believe these things to be true, then why are you so sad? I can tell you, it's hard because we don't get to see these people for a long time, right? Whether I live another year or whether I live to be, 90 years old, another 40 or so years, I know that that's a long time. And given that, it's hard to not have my dad, who I can share things with, my brothers, who I can share things with as well, and do things like go on hikes with my quadriplegic brother and so forth, right? Stuff like that. His life has totally changed. With that in mind, it's still sad. It's still hard. And if I'm not careful, then that sadness gets the best of me. As I've mentioned, having suffered with depression, I know what can kick that off. I know that being sad and dwelling on those things can put me into a fit of depression. I know that because that's happened before. And therefore, I don't dwell on those things. I think some people would look at that and say, wow, you're unemotional, Dave. I can't believe that you just don't feel sad about these things. I do feel sad, but I do my best to control my thoughts. I do my best to not dwell on the negative aspects of these things. I don't do anything that would get me into a state of depression. That is the hardest thing. I know that that will be problematic for me. I know that if I do that, it might last years like it did before. And so I just don't dwell on those things. So I have my faith. I also have the workaround. I have my faith for sure, knowing that I'm going to see these people again, that we'll be in a family relationship again. Knowing that, I also know that I can get sad very easily, and if I'm not careful, I'll get into a bout of depression, and so I control my thoughts. That control of thoughts has been a major component of me dealing with mental health challenges. I have experienced in my life many times where if I could just keep control of those thoughts and not dwell on those things that are negative aspects of my life, of other people's lives, of life in general, whether it be politics or other aspects of things that are happening. Because if I did get sad to that point, then I could easily slip into depression, and I do not want to do that. With that in mind, maybe some of you are in that same situation. I could tell you in terms of my own thought control. I remember years and years ago, a person teaching me. Now, this person was not a mental health professional either, right? So don't even take this as advice, right? Because it's just a regular person. But he told me, he said, when you have a thought, you just have to imagine in your mind taking the picture of that thought and crumpling it up like a piece of paper and throwing it away. And then probably because our minds are they're pretty keen, they're pretty good at remembering exactly what we were just thinking about, even though we threw that image away, we need to do it again. We need to do it again. In other words, when you have, whether they be images that you shouldn't be looking at or thinking about, whether they are thoughts that you shouldn't be thinking about because they will cause you problems, then you just crumple them up, throw them away, crumple them up, throw them away, crumple them up, throw them away. I've been to a point in my life, I've done that 30, 40, 50 times, conscientiously not allowing these thoughts, this idea of sadness, these ideas that would be negative aspects of my life. I have done that over and over and over again to a point where it could become tiresome and tedious, and maybe my mind is tired of doing it. I don't know. I'm not a professional, right? I don't know why that is, but I can tell you that is one of the things that I do to keep my mind off of the negative aspects of my life, those negative thought processes and so forth. With that in mind, that's all. I mean, you know a little bit more about me. You know about some of the struggles that have happened in my life. You've heard a little bit about how I deal with that. And I deal with that constantly, constantly. I am not here to say that it goes away. It happens to me all the time. I still deal with things. And even, I even mentioned this in a previous podcast. Actually, it's a future podcast, one I've already recorded, but that I'm going to release here pretty soon, that it can be very challenging for me to sit in this chair and record a podcast episode. So I want to make sure this is clear. Just like what you read on social media, if you're listening to my podcast, you're watching me on YouTube, whatever it might be, you might look at it and say, wow, this person, these are episodes he's putting together, and wow, he's a creator, or whatever, whatever the term is. I want to make sure you know that getting these episodes out is a mental health challenge for me. It is hard to do. The ADHD, the anxiety, the depression is something that weighs on me all the time, to a point where it's hard for me to get sitting in this chair, turning on the camera, turning on the microphone, push that record button and start recording. The fact that you're listening to and or viewing this episode is the proof that it is possible to overcome those things. Now, again, I'm not the kind of person that's going to say, hey, look at me, I did it, that kind of a thing. But know that every time you get to listen to an episode, every time you get to watch an episode, in my mind, that's a triumph. And what I do is I celebrate those triumphs. I celebrate those times when I was successful, because I know the next time it is going to be just as challenging. And so I am going to celebrate every time I have that success. It's the exact same thing with everything we do. Get rid of those negative thoughts, celebrate those successes. That would be the take-home message I would have for you with this episode. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Look at our website, navigatingabrokenvessel.com. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you and find out what are the things that you do to overcome these major trials in your life. I think it would be awesome if you wouldn't mind sharing. Let's get rid of this stigma. Navigatingabrokenvessel.com, Facebook, Navigating a Broken Vessel, likewise with Instagram. Send me an email, dave@navigatingabrokenvessel.com. Thank you so much. Seriously, you probably have an idea of what it feels like to accomplish something. It's the same thing for me. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, Dave, the music's about to start up. You're going to close an episode. As soon as I smile and say goodbye, I hope you can imagine the triumphant feeling I'm going to feel having just the knowledge that I have completed something. I want to leave you with my best. I hope the best for you. And I do hope you'll join me next week on the next episode of Navigating a Broken Vessel.